Good morning. My name is Blaine Monaghan. I'm the President and CEO of Pacific Ridge Exploration. We are focused on copper in BC. Forward-looking statements, I love making them, so I'm going to make a few. This is a really important slide for a lot of different reasons. One is it shows you where we're located in BC. We have 5 copper gold porphyry projects. They're all located in north central BC. It also gives me an opportunity to talk about the importance of positive relationships with local First Nations. So I think for an exploration company in BC to have success, it's like a tripod. You have to have access to capital, you have to have the science, the geology, and you have to have positive relationships with local First Nations. We spend a lot of time on that. As a matter of fact, after I'm through here in Frankfurt and London, I'll be traveling to Prince George, which is the administrative center for a lot of these First Nations, towards the end of November to provide an update, answer any questions, and talk about our plans moving forward. So I think that's the key, is constant and open communications. And if there are any issues or any problems, we can kind of nip them in the bud or address any concerns. This is a busy slide, but it really summarizes the opportunity. So one of the most important things that happened to us more recently was we partnered with the Fiore Group in June. So that's Frank Justra's private equity company, invests in a lot of resource stories. So they helped us raise $3 million. That enabled us to go back and drill RDP, which should return some of BC's best copper gold intervals in 2022. It also enabled us to publish a resource for our flagship project called Kliyul. We published that resource in August. It puts us now amongst a select group of companies in BC with a pretty significant resource, 334 million tons grading a 0.33 copper equivalent, or about 2.42 billion pounds copper equivalent. And if we were to use a gold equivalent, 5.7 million ounces gold equivalent. It remains open. And there's a number of other exploration targets on the project area that we'd like to test moving forward. But most of the money we raised this year was for our drill program at RDP. And you can see that interval there, that 112 meters of 1.35 copper equivalent is amongst the best returned in BC this year. And it's earlier stage, but I think Kliyul really underpins the valuation. And I'll have a slide later showing really that actually with that resource, we are significantly undervalued. I think it's a matter of time as we continue to communicate the story, because it is a recent resource. We just published it, and people can compare that resource to those of our peers. They will see the opportunity. On the management slide, I've been involved now for 25 years. I've come full circle actually with Frank Justra. I started in 2001 with a company that was called Wheaton River Minerals, which ultimately merged with a company called Goldcorp, which was then acquired by Newmont. So it's interesting, after all this time, I'm now involved back with Frank Justra and welcome his support and Fiore Group support to help us achieve our objective of becoming BC's leading copper exploration company. My technical team, or our technical team, is headed up by Jerry Carlson, a tremendous amount of experience, very well respected in the scientific community. So Jerry and Danette, our VP Exploration, come up with the exploration plans and thesis. We do have an independent technical committee. They present those plans to the independent technical committee, so I know that anything that emerges after that has been very well thought out, and then it's really my job to get the capital for them to execute. One of the things with the Fiore Group, part of our agreement was that we would appoint 2 independent directors or nominees on their behalf, and we also appointed strategic advisors, Rob McLeod and Ryan Waymark. So I would characterize the relationship with Fiore as very positive. What we'll be looking forward to moving forward is continued support on the capital access side, but also deal flow. So I think Fiore looked at Pacific Ridge as having a very solid asset base and one that was very much undervalued. And they looked at that as to provide a foundation for us to continue to grow. So I suspect over the months ahead, you will see some additional acquisitions, whether at the project or corporate level. On the share structure side, we now have 61 million shares issued. We raised about $7.5 million this year. So we went from about 17 million shares to just over 61. All of those shares are free trading. We have been a very liquid trader. We have traded more than 75 million shares since September 1. Our average trading volume is over 1 million shares a day, which is pretty significant for a company of our size. So I think that provides investors with a lot of opportunity to get in and out, which is really important, obviously, for a lot of funds and institutions also. On the cash side, we will end the year with about 2 million, so there's no immediate pressure to access capital, but we will have to fund our plans for next year's exploration. Where we are, we're in the Quesnel terrain. We're in the northern part of it. Essentially, the Quesnel terrain hosts almost all of Canada's porphyry mines. We're at the northern end where there hasn't been historically as much exploration, but it's an area that's really heating up. And it's been heating up because of a recent discovery by A-Mark Resources at their their Joy project. We're located just south of the past-producing chemists. Our Kliyul and RDP are our flagships. So one of the advantages here for us with Kliyul is it's only about 8 kilometers from that Almanica mining road. So although it is helicopter accessible, it's not too far away, and we can actually get our costs down pretty low. Just a close-up on Kliyul, again, from the infrastructure standpoint. We're looking west here. So we basically move all of our heavy goods up along this road. And this road and power was actually constructed for the past-producing chemists, so there is a template in place. They were essentially creating concentrate on site and then shipping it down this road, trucking it down this road to a town called Mackenzie where there is a railhead, and then it was being trucked to port. So it can work here. It has worked in the past, and I suspect at some point in time we're going to see actually a restart at Chemist and probably a mine or two possibly to the north of Chemist. It's been very active. There's been a number of significant discoveries, some significant resources. I suspect this area is going to become a lot busier as time goes on. So our flagship Kliyul, it's a large project. We own it 100%. Almost all of our resources have been focused on the Kliyul main zone. It's just one target area. Of the $15 million we've spent since 2021, almost all of the drilling has been focused on the Kliyul main zone where we publish this resource. If someone were to come to me today and say, hey, if I gave you another $15 million, what would you do? I would be more focused on trying to make another discovery at Kliyul. Porphyries do tend to occur in clusters. We have done very little work outside of the Kliyul main zone. We've drilled one hole at Ginger, one hole at Ginger South, one hole at Parish Hill. We've never drilled BAP Ridge or M39. And actually last year we did a ZTEM survey and identified another highly prospective area just to the north of the Kliyul main zone that was previously unrecognized. So what I think you'll see us do moving forward is a combination of infill drilling at the Kliyul main zone deposit, also looking to expand it, but a bigger focus on trying to make another discovery at Kliyul. This is, it's a busy slide, but it's interesting for a lot of different reasons. We report Kliyul as a copper equivalent, but in reality, this is a gold deposit. It is a gold-copper porphyry system. So the gold to copper value ratio is about a 2-to-1. We choose to report in a copper equivalent because then we can compare ourselves to some of these other companies that also report a copper resource in BC. There aren't many peers that we can compare ourselves to if we use the gold equivalent. But if you used a gold equivalent number, you would have 5.7 million ounces gold at the Kliyul main zone. It's already big, and it can continue to get bigger. So I think this just helps people understand the size of what we already have here. The money we raised this year was principally for drilling at RDP, which I'm going to talk about after Kliyul. We drilled 5 holes in 2,100 meters, but we accessed some more capital in the summer, which enabled us to do a couple more holes at Kliyul. Again, it was focused on sort of infill drilling, resource expansion drilling. Only 2 holes, but I am expecting to report those probably next week. Hole 70 should return a decent result, and it shouldn't come as a surprise. It was drilled right into the guts of the Kliyul main zone, testing a 130-meter gap between 2 holes that have returned some pretty decent widths and grades in the past. So I think everybody should keep their eyes open for that. For all the geologists out there, we're just showing some core. Typically what we see at Kliyul is pyrite, chalcopyrite, pyrite, in some cases bornite, which is nice because that's a higher grade copper sulfide. We see a lot more bornite at RDP, and that's no surprise because it is higher grade mineralization. This is a typical BC porphyry, big bulk tonnage, lower grade copper gold. It's just a matter of having sufficient tonnage, good access to infrastructure, and obviously if you can continue to improve your grade, that's a positive. We talked a little bit about this. I like this image too because it just gives you an idea of what the project area looks like. So we're in the Alpine. We're about 1,800 meters elevation. We're looking west here. So this is the Kliyul Valley, and there's a Kliyul Creek, so that's why it's called the Kliyul project area. But the deposit it occurs in the bottom of a valley. It's pretty easy terrain to move around once you're up there. And again, we talked about the focus of drilling at Kliyul Main Zone. I am much more interested at this point in time, now that we have actually published a significant resource that is open and we know that it can continue to grow. It's not going anywhere. So let's go out there and see if we can find something similar that's bigger or perhaps even higher grade. Now, Kliyul underpins the valuation. RDP provides the higher grade copper gold discovery opportunity. It's return grades that have really raised eyebrows. This is not typical. This is not the typical porphyry grade you see in BC. You don't see it happen that often. And why we went back there this year and chose to drill RDP first is because I mentioned AMark, who I believe is here at this conference also. They came up with a fantastic new discovery at their Joy target in January, and their stock quintupled on that news. So we all thought, well, maybe we should go back to RDP because it had returned similar grades as AMark's new discovery, and you can see that hole there. We had this option to Antofagasta from 2022 to 2024 while we were focused on Kliyul. So they did a pretty small program in 2022. They returned that interval there, that hole 5, which was one of BC's best copper gold intervals that year. They dropped the project in 2024. And I think really what they did in 2023, the follow-up on that hole 5 was wholly inadequate. If a junior was to return a hole like that, we would come back with a lot more drilling. It would be more closely spaced because you're trying to figure out the geometry. And if you're in mineralization, you would keep going. Antofagasta did the opposite of that. So they came back and they only drilled 2 holes that were 300-meter step-outs, and where we predicted mineralization would occur, it did, and they shut the hole down to mineralization. So I'm quite happy, actually, that they turned it back to us because that gave us the opportunity to drill it the way a junior should drill a discovery like this. So this year we did 5 holes in 2,100 meters. The first couple holes were closely spaced on following up on that hole 5. Hole 11 was slightly better. It returned a pretty significant interval. Holes 12 and 13 were testing our thesis that this was a steeply dipping tabular body. So when you look at, say, hole 5 and the bottom of hole 7, that's where we predicted mineralization would occur, and that's where Antofagasta did intersect mineralization and shut it down in mineralization. We believe that confirmed that we had a steeply dipping tabular body. Antofagasta believed that it was a separate raft of mineralization, which we disagreed with. And hole 12 and 13 confirmed that, yes, no, this is one body. And then the last hole, hole 14, tested this western magnetic lobe, and it intersected a new zone of porphyry copper gold mineralization. So this is very early stage. Kliyul Main Zone, we've drilled more than 20,000 meters of drilling. At RDP now, and this is just one target area at RDP, it's only seen 12 holes, but it's returned some very, very decent grades. We're looking very forward to getting back there next year and following up on this. Most important slide. People ask me, I always say, well, we're very much undervalued. And they go, well, why is that? And I said, well, I think we can compare our resources to some of these other peers in BC. And again, why it's important that we report in a copper equivalent. So I think, we can look at all of these various deposits. I think this is an appropriate peer group. I would argue that our deposit compares very favorably and in some cases better. In some cases, it has more tonnage. It is one zone of mineralization versus a number of different zones. It is a current resource. It is copper gold versus a copper moly. So for a lot of different reasons, I think all of these deposits, you can measure them against each other, and some come out ahead in some areas, and some come out ahead in others. In any event, I think the Kliyul main zone ranks quite highly, and we should not be trading at such a discount. And I think as time goes on and we can continue to communicate the story, we'll close that gap.